Welcome back to the programme. There is growing anger on the streets of Beirut. It's a city which is no stranger to protest. But this time, the sentiment is different. People want answers following the devastating explosion in the city's port that killed more than 130 people and left a further 5,000 injured. Lebanese authorities are urgently investigating a number of port and customs officials, and there are claims that government negligence may have contributed to the disaster. Ricardo Borges reports.
It's the first step to recovering from shock, burying the dead. 3 days after the strong explosion that destroyed part of Beirut, the first funerals of the victims began to take place. International search and rescue teams have already begun arriving in the country to try to find any survivors under the debris of the explosion. The explosion has made over 140 dead, thousands injured and tens of thousands homeless. In Beirut, French President Emmanuel Macron announced an international fundraising conference for Lebanon in the coming days. But Macron also stressed that it's time for some changes in the country.
Today is the time of responsibility for Lebanon and its leaders. We must rebuild trust and hope, but it cannot be won back overnight. Lebanon needs a new political order.
The divorce between people and politicians brought dozens of Lebanese into confrontation with the police this Thursday night. They were trying to get closer to the government buildings when they were scattered with tear gas. At least 16 officials from the port of Beirut have already been arrested as part of the investigation related to the stored 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. The former captain of the boat that took the product to Beirut assures that the authorities have known about the problem for years. Boris Prokoshev reveals that the ship left Batumi, Georgia in 2013, heading to Beira in Mozambique, but made a stop in Beirut. And since the ship's owner did not pay the Lebanese authorities, they weren't allowed to proceed with the trip.
He hadn't paid the port duties or penalties, and they seized the ship for that. They knew very well that there was dangerous cargo there.
In the midst of the chaos, an elderly woman has become a symbol of hope in Beirut. When she entered her house and saw the wreckage, 79-year-old May Melki sat at the piano and began to play, a moment filmed by her daughter-in-law, which has become viral on social media.
Well, speaking to us from the ground is Carol Malouf, a journalist in Beirut, and she says there is a growing list of unanswered questions over the explosion.
The problem is that there is mistrust between the people and the government. The people are angry because they do not believe that the government is undergoing a thorough and transparent investigation, and they think that whomever was responsible in government there would be another cover-up, as we have witnessed over the last 30 years. So this is why people are angry. Like, nobody has been arrested at the moment. Several people have been put under a travel ban. Some people's bank accounts have been frozen. But we haven't seen even a single official resign in response to what happened. So people are angry because they don't feel like the politicians are moving any finger in that direction. And it's as if business as usual. Even the rescue operations, they're not up to the standards. People are removing their own debris. You see armies of volunteers on the streets removing whatever is left from the homes that were devastated in Beirut. Some rescue operations at the port, official rescue operations, are ongoing. Some bodies are being removed from under the rubble. But other than that, you don't see that the politicians are really there for the people. So the anger and the frustration was displayed last night in demonstrations next to the parliament. That was in return returned by tear gas and water cannons by the police.
There is, of course, an urgent and desperate desire for people to understand why this happened. President Macron, visiting yesterday, said that there should be an international investigation. How has that idea gone down, and what is the status of the investigation into the cause of this as it stands?
Well, this should be disgraceful to the politicians. This means that the international community, represented by President Macron, does not trust the Lebanese authorities and the Lebanese judiciary in undergoing a transparent investigation. So this is what people are saying. If this is what the international community is asking for, this is also the demand for the demand of the Lebanese people from day one. And we've also heard that the League of Arab Nations will present the case of Lebanon for an international inquiry at the United Nations Security Council on Monday in New York.
The blast is the latest tragedy to befall Lebanon. In recent years, it struggled with wars, the coronavirus, economic collapse and unstable governments. There are now growing calls for the investigation into the blast to be conducted by the international community. For more on this, Bobby Ghosh is an editor and columnist at Bloomberg, and he joins us now from London. Thank you very much for your time. Look, our reporter, Carol, just said there that the sentiment of the people in Beirut and Lebanon is that the politicians, aren't there for the people. As offers of aid and assistance come in internationally, what concerns are there about what might be done with the money and the help?
Well, the biggest concern in Lebanon is corruption. It is the entire political elite of the country is famously venal and corrupt, and they have a long history and good practice of essentially siphoning money away from good causes from the state exchequer. The second-order problem is that of money being siphoned off towards terrorist activities because of the presence of Hezbollah, which many Western countries, Europe and the United States, regard as a terrorist organization, and which is busy fighting a war in Syria as well as confronting Israel on Lebanon's border. So between these two factors, money disappearing into the pockets of their leaders or money disappearing into the war in Syria or into Hezbollah's coffers, these are very serious concerns, and the people of Lebanon know better than you or I that this is a real possibility.
I was reading one of your pieces, and it was quite poignant what you said. The world wants to help the Lebanese. The politicians in Beirut must help us help them. How likely is it that you think we'd see a sort of shift in sentiment so that could be facilitated?
Well, I don't think they will do it. The politicians will do it willingly. What they need to do is create a transparency. Of course, they need economic and political reforms at a high altitude, and they've needed it for a long time. But for this emergency, for money to be sent in to rebuild Beirut, they need to create a system of transparency and accountability so that the money, people who are sending the money or who are lending the money, can feel confident that it will be spent for the purposes for which it is required. For that, you need transparency. How do you create that transparency? Perhaps you can create a system of supervision, just as people are talking about an international investigation into the causes of the explosion. Perhaps there can be an international panel, an international body to supervise how this money is spending. Will they do it? Not voluntarily. That is not their first tendency. But perhaps Macron and the rest of the international community can put pressure on them. It should be, I argue in my column, that it should be a condition. And the world should tell the Lebanese politicians, we want to help you. We desperately want to help your people. You have to help us help you by creating a system that gives us confidence.
And that was some of the sentiment that was being echoed by President Macron yesterday when he arrived there. Thank you very much for your analysis, Bobby Ghosh, editor and columnist at Bloomberg, speaking to us there.